Hi, Rich. We'll talk about the Foxtrot specifically. Yesterday on your lesson, we talked about the wave, and we're really talking a lot about which hip to place. I'm going to say down, but when you place a hip down, of course, it comes in towards your center. And there's always an oppositional movement of the head weight and upper body. So let me talk just for a moment about shape and sway. And of course, a lot of these elements, they all work together to create a whole, but we do try to separate them into an understanding. We always have shape. So what is shape? Shape is, of course, the shape of the partnership, the dance hold, the position of our bodies, the way we use our bodies to create beautiful body lines. So when we have shape, we don't necessarily have sway. Sway is a natural inclination of the body from the feet and ankles and creates what we see in the top as far as that curve, where we're swaying away from our free leg, or we're swaying towards the center of the turn. We have sway that's functional, that helps us to manage swing and rotation, like in your natural turn, like in your reverse turn. And we also have more of a decorative type of sway or cosmetic sway, where you're doing something for beauty, for instance, an oversway. So when we have a sway on a stationary figure, that is a decorative sway, or lunge. Right? This is a sway and a shape together. So when we're dancing, the shape of the body always has to be beautiful, and that is the head and spine have to be aligned nicely and not have these broken shapes. In order to do that together in partnership, we have to be able to control that hip area. So we've been talking about putting your hand in your pocket so that you can feel this area where your femur or your thigh bone goes into the hip. Now, if I'm going to also have sway, that's going to become much more extreme, that dropping of the hip and the movement of the head weight in a seesaw type effect. So we would never want to have something like this. So we have to get used to that position. Now, one of the practice exercises we did yesterday was simply to have your feet together and to create the curves by taking your hip towards the center. And as you do that, being aware of your head and shoulders moving in the opposite direction. It's not hard to do that standing still with your feet together. But it is more difficult to do that when you're standing on one foot. So what I had you do was to try that and then to pick up a foot. And that was a little bit difficult. When you extended your leg, it became a little bit easier because I do have some pressure or energy in my free leg. But you notice too, I'm really conscious of taking my head weight in the opposite direction. The balance in doing that is I'm not taking my head weight outside of my foot. Okay, so the way we describe that, let's say in shaping and in swaying, is that this is our action and this is our reaction. So unless we're choosing a broken sway, which we may have on a tipsy or the silver tipple that goes into the corner where we have a quick shape through the top. If I dance a right lunge here, I'm actually using technically a broken sway. And then we use that term broken sway in a positive manner rather than a broken sway that's a bad thing. So we do have broken sway, which is more top, and we have true sway, which is created in the bottom and reacted in the top. I always have my upper center over my feet. So the exercise of keeping the feet together, dropping a hip down and in, and letting your head weight go into the opposite shape. Now when you sway to the left, or shape to the left. So shaping is simply that I'm putting my hip down in order to keep my body line correct. You don't see a visible sway here. If I do more, I have sway. But I do always have shape. So I'm always aware that when I take weight onto a foot, I don't sit. Now, of course, I have a shape now, but it's not a good shape. Usually ends up with my head in a funny line. So there. I may have a very flat top, but I have created a shape in my body by keeping my hip line underneath me. As I said before, if I want to make that sway, I will increase it. In either case, as we're dropping a hip, it's always informing our free leg. So we're finding this very handy in creating any of your movements, natural turn, reverse turn, whatever type of action you have where you need to swing the leg through. If my hips are perfectly level, as I take weight onto the foot, I almost naturally will sit. I don't have any indication to swing my leg there. But if I take the hip downward and under, that speaks to my free leg. And you notice right now I have not pulled my head weight in the opposite direction. That's what I need to do. So we will look at that throughout the wave, but just a little review there of your practice exercise, doing it with your feet together, keeping the head weight over the feet, keeping the high center over the feet, but moving the low center through the leg structure and the hips, and then allowing that to send a leg out. When we're dancing, if that's done well, it doesn't look terribly extreme, but it feels extreme when you're not used to it, especially this idea of using the head weight away from the leg. And we really have to address the head and the hips together. So the wave is made up of 3 parts. We're doing the 3 steps of a reverse turn, 3 steps of the wave itself, and then 3 steps of an impetus turn. And actually there's a slow taken at the end of the impetus turn, so that would technically be 4 steps. We also could dance a hesitation where he'll pull after the wave. But in our routine, we're using an open impetus turn. So if we looked at those 3 different pieces, on the first 3 steps of the reverse turn, you would have your left hip down and you would be pulling your head weight to the left. As you dance the wave, you'll be changing to put the right hip down, and the head weight is more up and back to the right. And on the impetus turn, we'll be putting the left hip down and the head weight more to the left. So as I was saying, that one seems to be more natural. The reason that is because in our dance position where we have to keep our heads away from our partner, this is where my girl is. So if I sway or shape to my right and drop my right hip down, if I let the weight of my head fall into the right, it's going to be impeding into the space of the lady. So when we take our sway to the right, it also has a 3-dimensional form to it. So the weight of my head feels more back than it does to the left. I don't know that that's actually true, because when we do a left turn, we have to reflexively think backwards. But I think it has to do with the dance position, why so many people find it awkward to sway to the right and not do this exactly the same way. Now, if I'm in a line, I can do that. I can take my face pretty far to the right to look at the girl, but there are a lot of figures that wouldn't be correct. But even so, in this particular line, because I have my head weight also on the back diagonal, if I had my girl here, you would still be able to see space between the head, and my head and her head. It would not take my head into the girl's space. And when you do that, see, I'm also taking my head weight outside my feet. So it's important that I feel this. So this would be true for the second step of the wave, or any action, even the natural turn where I need to sway to the right. And we have different approaches here. We have the classical approach of keeping the face here. So we describe the head to the left, the face to the left. It's not this way. It's there. So you can see the weight of my head is still on the back diagonal, away from where my hips are in the sway. Now today, you do see some dancers achieving the natural turn and using a rotation of the head before moving backward. You will see that as a style. Now I'm going to do it badly. Okay, you'll see that too. But I've actually taken the weight of my head too early and too soon to the right, and I put it outside of my feet. And at that point, we will get our heads lined up. We won't see that space between the heads. So we're going to stick with this more classical approach right now of keeping the weight of your head here. And then when you move back, using the weight of the head. So I'll come back to that when we talk about natural turn and spin turn, because we did apply this there. But let's stick with the wave for now. So those are my practice exercises, I could say. Left hip down, reverse turn. Slow, quick, quick. So I've increased my shape because I have sway on the quick, quick, or the 3-4. I have sway on the second 2 steps of my reverse turn. But if I were to transfer my weight on my slow and sit, I'm already going into my reverse turn in this position. I'm going to have a very hard time swaying to the left because my hip has stopped me. I have to begin to discipline this hip as I take that first step, and then I can pull stronger, let my hip work more fully forward, pull with my head weight, and I will then go from a shape to a sway. Now the other problem that was happening, and it's not just for you, but almost for everyone, is a tendency to sway correctly, or at least attempt to sway on step 2, and lose them on step 3. So let's say we did a good job keeping the hip down, we accomplished our sway, and then we go flat. When we go flat, because of the swing and rotation, we actually usually end up tilting to the right. So we get a good entry and then fall off. It's extremely common and very easy to do. And I'm going to address the ladies' part in a moment, because the lady can also take you out of balance if she doesn't control her hip line. So we're doing, if we say technically what is the sway, the reverse turn, it's straight, left, left. I must feel that through my hips, and I must feel that through the counterbalance and pull or indication through my head weight. So I have already shaped. You see, I have not sat on my hip. I'm already beginning to pull my head weight. I'm already dancing through my hip, but I do not have sway yet, but I do have shape. I always have shape. Straight, left, left. There. Not here. There. So now we're going to talk about the wave, and then we're going to do the most difficult part of the entire reverse wave, which is the transition from the reverse turn into the first step of the wave. That is the most difficult. But let's look at what part is the wave. So the wave is when you go back with your right, and then back with your left, and now at this point you're rolling through this heel. So we're down. This is a toe. So I have a rise there, but I have no foot rise here. And then I will be up on the 2 toes. It's very hard for me to do this in this space. So there's my up, no foot rise, and then up on the 2 toes. My sway here would be described as straight, right, right. Things are not quite that cut and dried when you actually dance them. We always actually feel a little bit late, let's say, in putting those shapes in. We maintain a little bit longer the shape of the preceding figure. I'll show you that in a moment. But let's just again look at the wave. Now I'll go the other way. Now of course I have this curve in my back which makes my right hip look up all the time. So you have to forgive my body. But I'm going to go back now. So there's straight, so I have no sway. And then I have a right sway, that needs to be maintained and not flat. So here's a bad one. I lost my sway on step 3. Now the other common, more common actually even than that, is for us to sway immediately on the first step. And it's usually not a sway, actually, it's a dump. It's a breaking. So we'll typically see that on the wave. We'll see a sway, we'll see it go flat, we'll see this change too early, and the wave becomes more like a rocking boat. So if I look again from the front now, when I go back onto my right foot, I must control my right hip underneath my body. I'm not yet in a sway, but I have a shape. I'm not going to allow my hips to go to neutral. Now my head is simply sitting dead in the center. I'm going to swing my leg back. I'm going to hold my hips neutral, and as I arrive on this foot, I actually feel as I'm holding it underneath me because it wants to sit. The other thing, I'm making sure that I don't dump the right side. So I'm using the term to say we're going too early into the sway, but I think it's not even an attempt to sway. It's just a mistake. So holding my hip line, driving my hip line now under. Now this immediately should set off this counterweight of my head, moving in the opposite curve of my tailbone. This is where the sway is a very three-dimensional action. And so that's where we can get confused about shape and sway, because we definitely have a three-dimensional shape and we have a sway that is more than an incline sideways. It also has elements of another three-dimensional curve to it. So I have straight, but I'm coming from my left sway and my left shape. I'm not going to immediately lose it. So this is important when you're reading the technique, that because step 1 of a figure is straight, that doesn't mean that you immediately lose what you had on the preceding step. How can we understand that better? Again, the technique is written in such a way that the position you're in is at the moment that the step is finished. Now, this is a weight change. I'm changing my weight, but I'm not doing a step. I'm doing a step if it includes a closing action of the feet. So when I'm moving back, that is the end of that first step back. The step is not completed at this moment. So the straight would refer to where I actually am at the moment that my feet pass. So if I'm coming from the reverse turn, I still have my shape and my sway to the left, and I'm preparing my leg. As I move, you will see me gradually moving into a straight position, as straight as I can be with my hips. But so we would not want to go straight, because that actually will quickly become a dump. So by the time my legs are passing, I'm passing through straight, my right hip is now going down and in. I'm getting some pronation in my leg, right? My knee is moving over my big toe. My head weight. Right? Now we often like to look towards our partner on the wave. It's a very nice picture. There's a big difference between pulling the head weight with the sway, looking towards your partner, and leaning on her side. So that's absolutely wrong. So you have to be careful. Now I could keep my face a little bit more in this position. It's very popular to turn a little bit more and look towards your girl. You just have to be aware of the direction of your head weight. So I know we're getting deep now to head weight and the angle of the hips. They really need to go together. So one thing you can practice holding on is if I'm finishing my reverse turn, I'm in my left sway, and I'm being sure to include my head in my sway and not try to sway with my head being forgotten. So as I'm closing my feet, I'm really not losing my sway or my shape. I'm preparing my wave. Now what I'm going to do here, you can see the angle of my hips, is send myself into the center and let my head weight move from here to here. Very hard to do that slow, but if you use something to hold on to. I'm beginning now, as I'm transferring my weight, to feel as though I've put my right hip down. Why? Because it naturally wants to go here. Now I have my bad shape again. Very hard to fix it once it's gone. So I'll do that from the other direction again. Of course, my right hip is always popped up, but we'll do our best here. So I'm in my left sway. Left hip down. We'll have to take a break here for a moment. All right, things have calmed down a little bit. Someone was walking down Gandalf's sidewalk, so he had to protest. And once again, everyone's mowing their grass today, but I'll try to speak loudly. So I'm going to turn around again and show you this from the back. Again, realizing my hip is always high on the right side, I'll try to keep it under control. But what I want you to notice is also the extreme change of the position of the head weight in the room, or in the direction, as we change from the reverse turn to the wave, and from the left sway to the right sway, and controlling the hips. So I'm going backwards now. I'm in third step of reverse turn. Okay. The left hip is down, let's say to an extreme, because I have a sway. I'm actively pulling my head weight. I'm also pulling my head weight back. You can see I've not got my hips tucked under so that the weight of my head pulls me out of balance. So there's quite a curve in the body here. Now, what happens naturally is we lose our shape usually, reason being we sit on our hip. So that's where I have to really call those muscles into play, and part of that, of course, is keeping the weight of my head over to the left and back, and not letting my head move into the middle. Then as we prepare, as my thigh goes forward, my knee works forward, sending my other leg back. So as we commence to move into the step, have not changed anything. As my legs are coming together, the step is completed. I want to sit. I have to keep my right hip down. That means I have to firm up those muscles because the natural thing is to sit. So in order for my hip line to feel or appear, let's say not to feel, but appear level, I have to actually have one under. Then I'm going to increase it and change my head weight at the same time into the right sway. Now I'm going to use this to show you from the back how far the weight of my head travels from here on the reverse turn to here on the wave. So here I am on the reverse turn. Well, my head is not forward, my head is pulling back, but it's way over here. There's my preparation. Now as I move to the right foot, look at the big change in my head weight as I pass through the right leg with the hip down, increasing to create the sway to here. That's where I was. That's where I am now. My lady, I hope I am encouraging her in my shape to do exactly the same thing. And one of the other things that I'm doing, and we'll talk about this more later, is that as I'm doing all that, because of the way I'm using that curve we've talked about in the back, it's creating information in my hands, in my frame, which is encouraging her to blossom off of my body and off of my frame. So everything is active. The arms are not just holding in position. They're also dancing, and I'm creating in my girl the shape that I want. So I hope I'm creating in her, so her head remains here to the left. She has an increase in her shape because of also the way her hip line as she steps forward onto the wave. I hope she's also not sitting down and now trying to make her shape artificially through the top. My top is active, but it is in response to what I'm doing down here. There. So I hope that I'm encouraging my lady to create that shape by the way she's swinging her hips and her head weight in opposition. So I actually feel in my arms and with my head and body as though I'm pulling the bow. So I've noticed that you've improved a lot the management of your right arm, where always your arms would collapse inward on the wave. And I think a lot of that is a reaction to this loss of balance caused by loss of control through the hips. So I'm really right here increasing the curve in my upper back, which is increasing the rotation and spiral in my arm to feed that information to the lady, and to feel almost that I'm pulling the bow from my head, my right arm, my left arm. As you can see, I'm not distorting the frame, but it's an active frame that's opening up. Then as we go into the impetus turn, our right hip remains down as we take this step. We will pass through the neutral position. Once again, the neutral position, or the straight in the technique, is when the feet are passing under the body. That's the end of the step. At that point, my technique would tell me that I'm straight. I still have to have a sense of my left hip now staying down, or I'll sit. And then as we close the feet, the left hip will work down a bit stronger. And we'll talk about that next week, because I'm sure we'll get into the impetus turn a little bit more next week. So I'm going to talk just for a moment about what I'd like my lady to do on 1, 2, 3 of the reverse turn, because she has a heel turn at the beginning of this figure, the reverse turn. You have a heel turn at the end of the figure, the impetus turn. Now, her heel turn is slightly different than yours in that her rise is earlier. We don't have to worry too much about that, but it's good for you to understand it. I am hoping now that my girl understands how to create her shape and then her sway by moving into the heel turn with her right hip down and her head weight in the same position that your head weight would be on step 1 of the wave. It's the opposite of the gentleman. So what happens with most of our girls, or if we do it wrong as man, even a very good girl can barely control the hip if the weight of the man is taking her out. So I hope I can encourage her to use her head weight up and back to the left to keep her right hip underneath, not this way, but this way. And as she closes her feet, her right hip is working down and forward to bring her out. So whether she opens her head or increases her head weight back and left, it's not important, but what's important is that her head weight also works in the opposite direction of her spinal movement. So she's closing her feet here. You can see as I'm moving forward that my head weight is moving in the opposite direction. I may choose to open my head, and in that case again my head weight is working opposite my feet. Now it's not that I'm really leading the lady to open her head, but when I have a sway to the left, it's her prerogative if she would like to open her head. So perfectly fine as long as her head weight, again, doesn't fall outside of her feet. But if as man, I lose my hip, I try to sway by using my top, what I end up doing here usually is falling to the right. So I'm trying to encourage this angle from the girl by the way I'm angling my body and my head. So this is a lot of stuff, and this is a difficult figure. But let's come back next week and talk a little bit more about the impetus turn, and we're going to continue to talk about how to manage your hips and your head weight. Because a lot of the things you're struggling with in keeping the shape, holding the frame, have to do with not being able to control the head and the hips together. So gradually we'll work through every figure.